All right, and we are back on Cyber Spotlight. Today we are joined by Anthony Green from the CPA of British Columbia. Thank you for joining us, Anthony. How are you?
Hey everyone, thanks Stephen for having me. I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. It's a really interesting organization you're a part of, and your role in there is quite intriguing to me. So I think our audience is really going to enjoy some of the things we get to talk about today. But before we do any of the technical stuff, let's just get to know a little bit more about you. So who are you? Where are you from? What's your job right now? And I guess what kind of got you into cybersecurity?
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with who I am. My name is Anthony Green. I am the security engineer at CPA BC. And essentially, what got me into cybersecurity, I would say, is I didn't get into cybersecurity right away. I started in IT. Actually did a diploma program that kind of did a little bit of everything. You learn a little bit of web design, a little bit of coding, a little bit of infrastructure, and a little bit of cybersecurity. So as soon as I hit my first cybersecurity course, I kind of just kept going. And from there on, I decided to specialize into my bachelor into cybersecurity after I finished my diploma. So I finished my diploma, then I started working while finishing up my bachelor part-time, specializing in cybersecurity.
Cool. And that led you obviously to your role at CPA, or did you have something in between there in school?
So actually, after my diploma program, I worked at London Drugs as a security analyst. I got an opportunity from the security officer there. He seemed to like me from the internship that I did a previous summer, and he decided to take me on as a security analyst to see if I could add some value to the company. And I was there for about 2.5 years until CPA provided a very good opportunity for me to move up in my career, and I've been there since.
Right on. That's awesome. So as a cybersecurity analyst, or sorry, not analyst, engineer, if you were in the elevator with someone and they were like, hey, what do you do? And you had to explain your job in like 15 seconds to them, what would you say you do?
So in 15 seconds, I would just say that I essentially manage all the cybersecurity projects when it comes to CPA BC. I know my title has engineer, but it's not always a technical role. A lot of times in smaller organizations that aren't necessarily huge enterprises, maybe 200 or less staff, they might only have one security person, and that person could be doing everything from the engineering to the management. In my case, I actually have an IT team where that helps me do a lot of the technical tasks as well. So I mostly manage the security program. So I essentially project manage a lot of the security projects, as well as strategize to see which ones we should be doing.
I think people would understand that. That's pretty clear explanation. In your organization, what do you think the biggest misconception is from the business side of the house, or maybe a different area in the company or the organization? What do you think the biggest misconception is about the cybersecurity department or your role in it?
So that's a good question. And let's go back to that last question a little bit for a sec. And it's the fact that I would say that it's not as technical as you think. Right. A lot of people think that if you want to be, get really into cybersecurity, you need to know the ins and outs of, how to hack the biggest companies. But that's really not the case. There's a lot of very easy wins that you can do by just understanding security frameworks without any technical stuff at all. Right. For example, cybersecurity awareness. You don't need to hack anyone in order to teach people how to stop themselves from getting phished. Right. So a big thing is it's not as technical as you would think. And another thing that I would say is cybersecurity is not just my job. It's actually everybody's job, right? All I can do is provide the tools, provide the policies, but it's up to the staff to actually follow the policies, right? And it's up to me to support them in following those policies.
Yeah, totally. Love hearing that. It's not just your job, it's everyone's job. And that is totally true, and it makes sense. Since COVID started, I know with your role at CPA, has anything changed for you guys on the cybersecurity front? Is anything different, or is it kind of the same messaging?
So on the technical side, I would say it's relatively the same. Not too much has changed technically. We haven't had any. We were always able to work from home. We just didn't have everybody working from home. Right. So technically, that was kind of the biggest change, and the biggest impact is the social dynamics, right? before, everybody used to kind of work together right beside each other. If you had a question, just pop your head up, look over, hey, and you ask your question, right? But now you have to actually give them a call on Zoom, or you have to send them an email. It's a lot harder to get a little bit of informal stuff going. But in general, I would say the job itself hasn't changed too much because of COVID. It pretty much stayed kind of following the same path same timeline that it was following before, or same path.
Fair enough. Well, that's good. What would you tell someone who is going to aspire to get a job similar to yours, or in that same feeling, like, or field? What advice would you give them?
That's a good question. So I like to usually say that there's 3 different things that you can do in order to get into, say, cybersecurity, or this also goes for IT in general, because cybersecurity is really a lot of times a specialization of IT as well. So there's 3 paths that I like to recommend. The first being formal education. So you can go, university, technical college, whatever, and get an actual education in that. Then you can also get certifications, right? So there's a lot of certifications that are industry standard certifications that employers will know depending on what you want to go into, right? For example, for security, there's Security Plus. There's a whole bunch of other ones, right? And lastly is networking. And that's kind of like, that's a big one. That's a lot of times undervalued, where if you meet the right people and you're actually interested in cybersecurity, you'd be surprised in how many people are looking for someone that they can kind of give an opportunity to, or give someone a chance to show what they can do. And that is what you would get with networking. If you do more than one of these things, it becomes a lot easier. If you do all 3, it's very easy to get a job.
Wow. Well, that's a super good little rubric there for people to follow if they want to follow in your footsteps or get into the field. So that's very helpful. How does Plurilock is an identity-centric company. How does identity and access management in your, or IAM as cybersecurity people would call it, fit into your kind of vision of cybersecurity at large?
That's also another good question. So with this, what I wanted to first do is separate it into 2 different things. There's external and then there's internal. So let's talk about internal first. So internal identity access management, that's more on kind of like, say, I'm working for CPA, so that's really more the IT infrastructure security's job, right? So in this case, my vision looks more like we're implementing multi-factor authentication, especially if you're working from home, and we're forcing multi-factor authentication on our users, right? And we're also forcing certain password requirements and stuff like that. We're forcing unique passwords for different accounts, right? So that's on the internal side. However, I do want to make a big point about the external side, right? Because as you may have heard on the internal side, I use the word forcing a lot. Well, the external side, we're not forcing anything, right? So for example, on the external side, what I mean is when we go to a member, so we go to an accountant, we do cybersecurity awareness, and we say, hey, multi-factor authentication is important and unique passwords are important. And here's how you do a complex password, right? So what we like to do is we like to do a lot of external education to our members and stuff. But internally, we actually force those things so they don't have a choice, right? If they're part of our company, if you want to log in, you have to use multi-factor authentication. However, if you're a member, you don't have to log in using multi-factor authentication, but we may recommend it, right?
Yeah, makes sense. So you use the term multi-factor authentication there a lot. So for those watching, why don't you explain a little bit more about what is multi-factor authentication? Why is it so important? And yeah, what are your kind of latest updates on using it and implementing it in a business setting?
Sure. Yeah, no. So multi-factor authentication, so MFA, multi-factor authentication, is essentially what it sounds like. It's more than one factor of authentication. There's also 2FA. It's also a big buzzword. That's just two-factor authentication. Doesn't really matter. But let's just stick with MFA. So there's different types of MFA. The most standard, or the most that you would usually see, is those where you log in and then you get a code and then you have to type in the code, right? There's different varieties of these, right? So there's the ones where you actually have to type in the code. There's ones where you just have to do a push notification. There's ones where code goes to your email, goes to your apps, goes to your texting. There's tons of different ones, right? And one that we've actually seen come up quite often, especially in the financial sectors, right? So if you try to log into your CRA account, which is Canadian Revenue Agency, or your bank accounts these days, you'll see that a lot of times they do have some multi-factor authentication, and in their case, it's usually some kind of security question. So it's not necessarily a code, but it's just a security question. Maybe like, what is the security question that you would have already set up? Like, what's your childhood pet's name? Something like that, right? So just to go back a bit, we have code type of multi-factor authentication, right? So they send you a code, you type in a code. Then we have push notifications, right? If you have Google authenticator set or a Google multi-factor authenticator set up, you may have experienced this where try to log into Google and you get a message on your phone that says, is it you logging in? Yes or no, right? Then there's the questions that I mentioned, right? So you have, rather than a code or anything, there's another question that you would have set up. So it's in addition to your password. There's another one that I'd like to mention is also with your bio, with your fingerprints, with your eyes, face
Biometrics.
ID.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's another one that's been used quite a bit these days. And then lastly is one that actually, your company is doing, Stephen, which is continuous multi-factor authentication, which is where they have created a data set of who you are based on the actions that you have done. And it's continuously checking to make sure that this is using artificial intelligence to continuously check that this is the right person, right? So there's tons of different multi-factor authentication options. That was the whole point of this long rant.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, because there's so many different options, try to use at least one as someone, like, for any of your main accounts. What I like to tell our accountants or members and everyone in general is, if you're not already using multi-factor authentication on your crown jewel accounts, so maybe your main email or your banking account, then it's only a matter of time until you get breached.
Yeah, it's some heavy messaging there, but it's it's very important. Obviously, as we've seen a lot of these breaches in the news start from compromised credentials, then being phished, in a super kind of obvious way. But it can be tough for people to transition as well. So working with the CPA, what have been some of the challenges, I guess, in like getting multi-factor authentication adopted or rolled out for like widespread use?
Well, the challenge that we have, I don't think it's a unique challenge to us. It's probably a challenge that every organization has had, and it's the classic security challenge. The more security obstacles you add, the harder it becomes for the user, and the more they try to get around it, right? Imagine like a stream of water. The users will always find the path of least resistance. So the goal is to enable multi-factor authentication in a way that doesn't impact the user's work so much that they try to find a way around it.
Right. That makes sense. So, and that's funny because at Plurilock we talk a lot about that being like trying to make multi-factor authentication frictionless. So it's just you can do your work while being authenticated and safe.
One last thing I do want to mention is that, as most of us know, phishing attacks make up most or a vast majority of a lot of breaches these days. And guess what the best way to prevent phishing attacks is, aside from teaching your staff? Multi-factor authentication, right? It prevents close to 99% of them, just because, I can go in, type in my credentials into a fake Microsoft, someone pretending to be my Exchange email account, or Exchange domain, whatever. I type in my Microsoft credentials, then they try to log in, but because they don't have that token, they can't get anywhere, right? They can have my password, they can have my username, but they can't actually log in.
Totally. So do you find like the accountants that you guys work with, do they, obviously they're all smart people, like do they adopt that pretty quickly and understand like the importance of it?
So we don't have insight into what they're doing like for themselves essentially, but what we do know is when we do these cybersecurity presentations, we do have a lot of very good feedback, and a lot of accountants are very interested in a lot of the stuff that we do say. I would think that a lot of them have their own multi-factor authentication set up already, but every time we do some cybersecurity presentations, we always have some of them coming back saying, we learned some new stuff and now we're implementing all this new stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's good to hear, and that your advice is not falling on deaf ears. So before we let you go, Anthony, I know you're a busy guy. Learn a little bit more about you, little this or that, something we do at the end of each show.
Mhm.
So are you more of a dog person or a cat person?
That's actually a very funny question because I actually have a dog, kind of. So back when we used to live with my parents, I had convinced them to get a dog and I said it was going to be my dog. But when I had finally moved out, my mom had fallen in love with the dog so much that now we have split custody. So I have her on the weekends, my mom has her on the weekdays.
That is adorable. That's pretty
Yeah.
funny. Are you Mac or PC?
So I'm a PC guy, but I am starting to like Mac. So I like PC for my main station because I'm a gamer. But if I were to get another laptop, I would strongly consider the Macs as a laptop specifically. I don't
Fair
know
enough.
about for my PC itself, but I like the laptops.
Fair enough. Fair enough. In life, as far as when it comes to taking risks, are you more of like an ask for permission guy or ask for forgiveness?
I mean, you're asking a cybersecurity guy, so I mean, I'm more of an ask for permission kind of guy.
That's probably the right
I
answer.
don't think I'd be in this field or I'd get very far if I was an ask for forgiveness type of guy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Do you enjoy a sitting desk or a standing desk at home?
So I have a hybrid. It's nice to switch around every once in a while once my foot falls asleep. So I switched I actually just got it last month because I had a sitting desk and my shoulders were starting to roll forward too much. So I got a standing desk and now I do some exercises and hopefully it's not going to mess up my posture.
No. Yeah. Good man. That's smart. That's smart. And finally, what's your most favorite outdoor activity?
That's got to be a tie between playing tennis, hiking, and picnics. I cannot choose between those three. I'll go do any one of them right now.
Sounds like a good day if you could fit all three of those in.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Cool, Anthony. Well, thanks for joining Cyber Spotlight. It was cool to hear your insights in your pretty unique position, I think. Where can people find you online if they want to network or connect with you further?
Yeah, so you can actually find me on LinkedIn, Anthony Green, and I actually do a podcast with CPA once a month where we actually do bring in a cybersecurity person as well, as similar to you, except we talk a little bit more about different frameworks and how to build a cybersecurity program rather than actually learning about that person like your podcast.
Cool. And what's the name of that?
It's under Coffee Chats with CPA BC.
Okay. Well, we'll try to leave a link to that below this video. And I will also leave a link to your LinkedIn program or your profile. But yeah, thank you, Anthony, for joining us. It was really fun having you on the show, getting to know you a little bit more. Thank you to everyone who watched for watching another episode of Cyber Spotlight. Check out all of our past episodes on the playlist on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys all on the next interview. Bye.